Welcome back to another episode of Growth Vertical. It's a special episode today because we have a special guest here, Mark LaChance. Am I pronouncing that right, Mark?
Well, since you're in Europe, it's LaChance.
LaChance. Okay. Okay. Is that
But if you're in the
French?
States, it's LaChance. It is French, yes.
Okay, brilliant. All right, I did not know that. But yeah, we have a special guest here, Mark. And now, for those of you who don't know Mark, he is the CEO and investor at Maximedia Inc., one of the largest TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, and Google Display network performance marketing agencies in the world. Mark is actually experienced in hypergrowth for startups. That's specifically why we brought him onto the show today. And that's through like creative business development, lead generation. And he's actually had 4 successful public exits at 4 different startups. So that's why today we're going to be talking about, how to build how to build highly profitable companies from the ground up, and how Mark LaChance made 4 successful exits. But before we get into it, everyone, if you're new here, I'm Neil Patel and I'm the growth marketer based in the UK. On this channel, we break down growth marketing and personal growth so we can better growth hack businesses, our careers, and ourselves. If you are liking the content, then do like, subscribe, and share. Otherwise, do follow the podcast and let's get to it. So, Mark, thank you for coming onto the show. I kind of wanted to give the audience a bit of a background about what you've done. So, it's great to have you here on the episode. But before we get into what you think it is that we need to do to influence startup hypergrowth, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, thank you for having me, by the way, and pleasure to be here. But I guess it all goes back 51 years. I'm just kidding. Don't spit out your water. No, basically, look, I think, entrepreneurs, obviously, probably entrepreneurs are listening to this. If you're an entrepreneur, there's a good chance that you've had a mega failure. And those mega failures are what really educates you on how to take the next step. So I had one of those colossal failures, and I'm going to give myself a shameless plug. I just launched a book called The Lucky Formula. By the way, in my last name, LaChance means lucky. There you go. So now you know
Interesting.
Why I named the book The Lucky Formula. And actually, the book starts out with my colossal mega failure. Actually, and the UK plays a huge role in this, by the way, in my failure. Because I was back in 2006 and 7, the Brits were actually, many people from the UK were buying up properties in northern Montreal, northern Quebec, because the currency was basically 2 to 1. And if you remember, Neil, the real estate market was going insane.
It was, yeah.
Right. So I was fresh off in 2006, one of the exits that you spoke about earlier. So I had several $1 million in my piggy bank. And at that time, I didn't know anything about risk management. And I basically went all into a project that was geared towards selling properties to the UK, to people from England or anywhere in the UK. And, so it was basically it was a log cabin style, the Canadian lifestyle. We were pitching that, and we had 200 acres on a lake. And the interesting part is that the centerpiece of the project was an old recording studio. So you had Sting, the Rolling Stones, you had the Bee Gees, you had, mega, the Police did their albums. Rush, who's a pretty popular band in Canada, did 6 of their albums there. So it was the most prolific recording studio, kind of like Abbey Road, I think, in Canada, or in actually North America. So we bought the studio, bought the land around it. So the colossal failure and the mistakes that I made was, number one, I went all in without doing much risk management on my partner, and not, sort of reading the tea leaves on the market in the market timing. So what happened in 2007, 2008, I was standing in a trade show in London, probably not too far from where you are, Neil, and there were literally crickets. There was nobody in the place. So we had set up we'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars setting up this beautiful booth.
Right.
And we were pitching, the idea was to pitch our properties, because prior to that, three real estate projects were sold out immediately, literally sold out quickly. Like hotcakes. They sold out within months of launch, and that was the same idea we had. But we launched at the wrong time with the wrong business partner. And anyway, fast forward to my time in England, I was throwing paper airplanes to the Sotheby's agent right across the way because nobody was in the place. And, fast forward a couple months later, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy and mega failure. And all the millions that I put in was basically vanished and gone. But the reason I talk about that is because I'm pretty sure that a lot of entrepreneurs on this that are listening now can really, relate to this, that when you have a mega failure, you also have a mega learning experience. So you learn things about risk management. You learn things about, leading. You learn things about not just taking everybody's word for it, doing your own research. So anyway, I was on the verge of bankruptcy and anxiety, depression, and that sort of, for 6 months I was doing nothing. I was watching my bank account go like this and this and this and this, and until one day I got up and I woke up and I said, all right, enough is enough. This is it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I would have to say that's my MBA in learning how to run truly run a business. So that's kind of a background of my, I mean, that doesn't give you the full story, but that gives you where I learned the most, where I got my MBA in business was that from there.
I think it's pretty interesting that you said that, because it's based on experience, right? Like most of us, I guess most of the market, or let's say society, would say that we should go and like actually get to the MBA or maybe read the guide on MBA, but then nothing really beats the experience. I've been through a crazy experience where I think I know what you mean, right? So you mentioned where you sort of stayed and like watched the over 6 months, like the numbers just go down. Now for me, I think I just got complacent, right? I was like, oh, I finished everything, right? I've got like the job. This is when I was working, etc. I got the job. I don't need to do any more learning. And then I realized I was actually like burning myself, right? So because the market's moving, everyone's still learning, everyone's improving, and then they're outpacing me. So for me, it's just like, oh, I'm at standstill. And then you realize that when I phased into the whole, like I say, agency environment, actually going after startups, right, and actually working with these startups, you realize that actually it's not so easy, because there's always like a pivot, something that's pivoting, right, in the market. And that actually caused me and, for example, our partnership we have, we went our own separate ways on good terms, of course. But still, it was just that stationary period where I was frozen, right? And you only learn because of the failure of, for example, on my part, how not to communicate, how I should have communicated the message back then to help them pivot through that time, right, as well. And, it's just one of those things, probably not to the same depth at which you have experienced it. And I have heard that,
that was the depths of hell, Neil.
Right. Well, I've heard actually when you're put into that position, I can't speak from experience for that, but I've heard that when you're put into that position, there is like that instant like turning factor where you've just almost like the light bulb, right? And you just decide to just pick things up and just get on with it.
But the thing is, it wasn't instant, right? So I was literally on my couch for 6 months, just wallowing in my fear and my depression and my anxiety. And then it was one day, just the decision was made. I'm a winner. I'm not this guy sitting on the couch.
Absolutely. Do you think people need that though? Do you think? I mean, this is a
some do. I mean, yeah. Look, some do, and some can just you need a shock to the system sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it was a lot of people need that learning experience. It was a learning experience. So it taught me a lot about leadership. It taught me a lot about, again, like I said before, risk management. It taught me a lot about myself as an individual, and early on, I was led around, and I was basically taking orders from the boss of the project. He was the expert, I wasn't, so I had to kind of bow down to his expertise, which was a huge mistake. So it taught you a lot about yourself, to believe in yourself, to believe in your gut. My gut told me this was the wrong move, but I went all in. Yeah. So why would I do that? So
that makes sense. Well, so you went from that, right? Like, what happened next? Because you have, I think it's been a trajectory since then, right? Like going up, but then now you're at Maximedia. You're the CEO of Maximedia.
Correct.
So how the hell did you transition from I was trying to understand that. I thought I'm just going to ask Mark on the show directly.
Well, I went from, it's funny. So I graduated a little bit before you, Neil. I'm sure I graduated back in 1992 university.
Right.
And I we had the opportunity to either work at Staples or work at State Street Bank for about $20,000 back then. So I wasn't too excited about either one of them. So I went back to work with my father in construction, which, that's my biggest why, is to never, ever work in construction again. And I talk about that in my book. Talk about, you need to have a why to be successful. And my major why is to never get on top of that roof in 100, I want to call it 45 degrees Celsius weather.
Yeah.
And have, black hot roof. So that's one of my whys. So at graduation, I went into construction, but it helped me get into the sports business because my brother was a professional athlete. And so I was a professional sports agent for about 8 years. And after losing a couple key clients, so imagine if you're representing footballers in the UK, in the British, it's called the British Elite League, I guess, right?
Premier League, yeah.
Premier League, that's right. So imagine if you're representing, I had 7, guys in that professional rank, and I lost 2 of them in 1 year. So that was about 30% of my revenue. They were 2 of my top earners. And that was also a shock to the system. So I learned a lot about, having sustainable recurring revenue businesses. So then that got me into payments, and I saw a buddy of mine who was making recurring revenue. He didn't have 7 clients; he had 2,000 clients, and if he lost 1 of them or 2 of them or 7 of them, it wouldn't matter. So that's what got me into recurring revenue, and then from recurring revenue, I obviously, had 2 startups that I sold in the payment space. Got into real estate, got my ass kicked, and got back into what I knew, which was payments. So right after that mega failure in 2009, I launched another company with partners from the U.S. And we sold in 2016. They took it public. So that's and in between, I also had another payments company. So those are the 4 exits that led to public offerings. And how did I get it? You're kind of asking, how do I go from payments to marketing?
The transition.
Look, my philosophy is this. I've studied with Dan Sullivan. I don't know if you know him, strategic coach. He's one of the premier, I would call him, entrepreneur coaches of maybe all time. And his philosophy is, if you have the right people around you, then you don't need to be an expert in anything, really. So, so that's how you can transition from, let's say, understanding payments to marketing. I'm not a media buyer. I'm not a creator. I'm not a copywriter. You probably can do all of those 10 times better than I can. But I understand how to hire the right people, and I understand how to put the right people in the right places, and motivate and lead by, let's not by example, lead by example, but also lead by watching by inspiration.
Yeah.
So and if you make that mistake, so for example, let's say you're starting a business. And I'll get to the entrepreneur's dilemma, which I think I named it that, but I detail it heavy in my book. But the entrepreneur's dilemma, and this is going to be helpful for a lot of your people, is entrepreneurs typically always think they're the smartest and have to be the best in everything in their company, right? For the most part, that's what happens. Neil, I don't know if that happened to you, but it was the case with me.
It still does. It still does.
Okay, so there you go. So I'm gonna. This is maybe an education for you. So launched that company in 2009. 2010, I find myself sitting at my desk. I have 200 employees, and I literally wanted to quit my business. So I was bankrupt in 2008, right? Basically bankrupt in 2008. Launched the business in 2009, and in 2010, I wanted to quit it. Does that make any sense to you? But I wanted to quit it because it was incredibly stressful, and I didn't know what I was doing. So think about it. You open your computer, you have 1,000 emails unopened. Yeah. And you're like, how am I ever going to get through this? But, so how did I fix that? I needed a mentor. I needed a coach. So I got on Google. It was December of 2010. I'm like, business mentor, business coach, business mastery kept on coming up. And that's Tony Robbins' event. So I went to that event, and the first thing I learned is that everything is my fault. If you're the leader, it's your fault. It's either because of you or despite you, or it's always, the buck stops at you, right? And there's another book called Extreme Ownership. That's an amazing leadership book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Yeah. Basically highlights the same things, right? So it's all about the leader. Now, so what was in 2011 was this event, January 2011. So a couple of weeks after I kind of hit that wall and had that epiphany. So what did I learn? I learned that I didn't have the right people around me. I learned that if you need to be, the end all be all in every decision, you're not leading the right way and you don't have the right people. So I went from having to know everything to being sort of shocked into not allowing others to make the decisions, and finding out quickly if that person is capable of doing that. Right. So Neil, you might be saying, here's a question I often get. All right, great. I don't have 200 people in my organization. I don't have the amount of dollars to go out and hire people to run the pieces of the business where I'm weak.
I was literally about to ask that.
So think about this. If you don't have the capabilities, like for example, Neil, if you're not a great tech guy, well, you go out and you get a partner that's a tech guy. If you're not a great salesperson and you're an amazing tech guy, then you go out and get a partner that's amazing in sales.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You need to fill the gaps with the areas or the weaknesses that you have. So if you're co-founding a company, so for example, we co-founded Maxi Media. I'm not a media buyer, but my partner, my co-founder, is a media buyer. Right? So I had the cash. I understand how to scale businesses, but I didn't know anything about media buying. I know everything about operations. I know everything about sales, biz dev, how to hire the right people and put them in the right place. So that's where we are today. So we went from, we started the business back in, I think it was Maxi Media was started in 2018. And fast forward 4 short years later, we're already hitting, where this year we should hit $60 to $70 million in revenue from zero 4 years ago.
That's
so
insane.
How do you do that? You put the right people in the right place. Don't be the person who believes that you need to know everything that's going on. And don't be afraid if you make a mistake to fire. If you make the wrong hire, you got to fire people. You just have to do that. I mean, it's for your sanity. Like I was going insane. I literally bankrupt 2008, 2010. I wanted to quit the company that I just started. That got me out of bankruptcy. Does that make any sense? And if you look back, it actually does, because if you think you're going to do everything, make all decisions, it's just not practical or feasible if you want to scale a business. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the entrepreneur's dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, everything you've just mentioned, I've actually experienced and started to experience, and I think that's where I started to actually lay the foundations for, hey, okay, so what do I need to do to eliminate this issue, right? Where, for example, I'm getting involved, and I think it needs to be done my way every single time. And I think I'm trying to get into the mindset now, and I have, by let's say making the right hires for the smart people to tell me, right, what to do in those situations, because they're the specialist in those areas. I don't need to be a specialist in those 5 areas and then command. It needs to be the other way, right? I rely on my expertise from a strategic level, but then theirs from a very more tactical level, and how we can maybe create that overall strategy to fit together to then deliver the end result, right? Opposed to just one to many, it's like many to one. So that way it's a better relationship. And now it's actually helped a lot more, because now I can actually see clearer what the next steps are for me to now stop being, oh, I am the specialist, I need to handle this, or I can give it off, right? So
absolutely,
it's one of those things.
Well, the other piece of that, Neil, is that it's a morale thing as well. So, for example, if you continually hire yes men, yes women, their morale is going to be low. It's like a government organization. Right?
Yeah.
Is the government efficient at all? Is the government motivated at all? No, they're not. And so, but if you hire the right people and you try to dictate to them, do this, do that, they're not going to, and they're smart, intelligent, and leaders in themselves, they're not going to stick around. It's like you're not going to have a good shelf life with those kind of people. But you put somebody that's highly intelligent and capable, let them do the job. They're going to be motivated. They're going to be excited. They're going to be, the morale is going to be high, and your company will have hyper growth like we've experienced. So.
Yeah. And that actually, so that what you said as well, right, brings me to the position about the initial position you were in with the payments company. For the first one, for example, did you have budget? What was the position then? Did you have budget?
Yeah,
was there investors?
So my partners in the U.S. were a big company. So I had 30% equity in the company, and they were the investment backers and also the banking relationship in Canada, right? So they were able to open the door to one of the biggest banks. And so they got us our processing payment. I mean, I don't want to get technical, but they got us our processing relationship. You need a big bank to do that. So they were the ones that opened that door, and I was operating the company. So they brought that kind of expertise. I didn't have it. They brought it. I had the expertise on how to run organizations, run sales organizations, and it was a great fit. But as I got there, they weren't telling me what to do. You run the shop. That was their standpoint. But since I hadn't been educated on how to run a massive organization, prior to that, the biggest organization I'd ever run was about 75 sales executives. I'd never run a full corporation.
That's pretty big. Yeah.
Right. So I had 75 sales reps from 2000 to 2006, where I exited that company as senior vice president. But in 2009, I had 200 people, basically are reporting into me. That was the first time I'd ever run a big organization like that. But I had the confidence that I could scale. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I said I had the confidence that I could scale because I'd taken, we had 3 people in 2000, and we built the company to 240 people, which 75 reported into me, right? 75 sales executives. So I had the confidence that I could do it again and run the full shop, but I just didn't know how to do it. I thought I did, but I didn't.
Yeah. So based on that, I was going to say that you said you were operating across the entire business, right? So the fact that you had the investors, you had to get the payment processor signed off, etc., right? Once that was done, I'm guessing you had your own strategy in place, or did you have a team put in place to run the strategy? For example, we have like a lot of startup founders or listeners even right out there that even say, for example, hey, well, what's the next step, right? We've managed to get like product market fit. We know that, hey, we've got a couple of clients that we know will use this product and that we've got great feedback. I think now we're ready to scale, right? And actually see how many clients we can take on board. So what was the shift between once you got the payment processor signed off? We know that that's more of an infrastructure thing for you guys, right? So
right.
How did you then go about getting traction, right? What did you do next? How did you tackle that whole question?
Well, look, and then it sounds like you have a lot of software SaaS companies that are listeners here. So we had maybe you can call it sort of a SaaS model. So our market was selling to small to medium-sized merchants. So anytime you use your credit card, think of who accepts credit cards. So it's either an online merchant, or a corner store. So we needed a distribution strategy. So we had the whole back end, we had the operations set up. We needed distribution. So I had to hire a VP of sales. I had to hire a VP of call center. And our strategy was, which would work well in the UK, or probably 10 years ago would have worked well, is we were booking appointments with shop owners or store owners and sending a local representative in to make the sale, to make the pitch. So we had a pretty diverse distribution network. So we had sales reps on the road that we had to recruit, train, and manage. We had a telemarketing team that we had to recruit, train, and manage that was delivering the leads to these gentlemen and ladies. And then we also had managers that were managing the whole operation. So it was a pretty intricate setup. So we had to find the best people possible. But again, like I said, out of the gate, I made the mistakes in hiring men and women versus hiring the best. And I came to that realization in 2010. And I basically, after I came to that realization, fired my top 3 executives and replaced them with people that were mentally stronger and could handle the job, and basically alleviate me from having to look over anybody's shoulder, which was amazing, incredible. And which allows you, Neil, to focus on what you do best. So that's the other learning that I've learned over the years, that if you're not doing what you do best and what you love, then you're not going to be good at it, and you're going to hate your job. So
100% agree.
Going from 2010 hating my job and my life to loving it 2 short months later was a pretty incredible epiphany.
Yeah, I hear that often actually with the successful, and then like bar the not so successful. You might have a few that fall through the cracks just because they know it and they're very like logical in the entire way through, and they just know how to set up the entire system. But I have heard so many times that the failure is either due to you just don't love the product enough to like take the time to understand it, understand the market, test, right? What's going to get traction, what's not going to get traction. And I'm guessing that was the thing behind you guys, right? You guys didn't say that this is definitely going to work, right? For example, getting into VPL sales and the call center and having these field sales reps in the actual field to sell and pitch to these shop owners. You actually tested those, right? So it wasn't a rinse and repeat mechanism, correct?
Well, we studied a couple other people's models. So there were people doing the business, right? So, for example, your entrepreneurs, it's pretty much So what I could say is that you're probably not going to recreate the next widget that's earth shattering or so. There's always other examples out there. So there were other examples. There were the feet on, I call it the feet on the street model. There were telemarketing models. There were salaried sales reps. So we tried them all, but we focused on the ones that work better. I mean, it's iteration, right? In software, you iterate until you get the right model, and you continue to iterate. So fail quickly. I mean, you always hear that, right? Fail quickly and make the adjustments and move on.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we did. I mean, we're doing the same thing in the media business. We're failing quickly and moving on. And that goes for hiring. If you hire the wrong person, you fail on the hiring, you move on. You make the adjustments.
And so, was that the same case? You took the same approach when operating at all of the startups that you actually managed to lead?
Well, that's the same case in the last three, because I just 15 years ago, actually, what is that? 12 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
So
quite a while ago.
In 12 years, I went from bankrupt to living pretty well. But look, I've used that for the last three companies because that's what works best. And if you can see my bookshelf right here, it's constantly educating yourself and keeping ahead of the curve. And I think you mentioned that earlier, right? So I think you said that you sort of took some time off and fell behind the curve. But if you fall behind the curve, people are going to run ahead of you. So you need to continue to. And here's another way, by the way, Neil, to stay ahead of the curve. You don't necessarily yourself need to be ahead of the curve. You need to have people around you that are ahead of the curve and smarter than you.
Yeah.
For example, I don't media buy. We have about 300 employees in the company, including our creators. So we've got about 150 creators that just do TikToks all day long. Do you think I'm a TikToker? Right? I'm not a TikToker.
No.
Who's going to want to watch me on TikTok? But if you see, our team is a bunch of rock stars. So I've never shot a TikTok video in my life, but I have 150 people that do. Right? So you don't need to be the expert in your domain if you have other people that are experts in that domain.
Yeah, and I think there was a sense of evolving over that process, right? So for me, I know that I was stationary because I wasn't doing the extra learning. I wasn't essentially. I may have been reading, or I may have just been I've done it now. I'm in the position, so now I'll just grow depending on what the job gives me, right? So, but that was not the case. Failed at that, then restarted, right, and managed to scale things up. I actually put my ass through volunteering, so that for free, to the point where I wanted to build the credibility to say to myself, hey, look, if I do this and I run the department and I get the result, I'm going to go and actually take this to another place. So I did that, right? And it was a rinse and repeat. And then I managed to get a management role. And after the management role, I was like, okay, well, now I think I'm ready to just go by myself and test this out. It was always that I just realized once I got the taste of learning something new, it was always that, oh yeah, Neil, don't sit still. It's totally fine to be outside your comfort zone and then move forward. So now I'm at the stage where, oh, Neil, you don't actually have to be the expert on, let's say, the LinkedIn media buying or the Facebook media buying and things like that. Because I've got the broader understanding of the strategy, I can implement that for a business or a startup. And then me and the team, we run those tactics, right? And we test each of those out based on our own growth marketing framework. And then we just scale the ones that work and kill the campaigns that don't, right?
Exactly.
But it's all from the keyword execution, right? So I would never have found any of those scaling opportunities unless I started to execute. And so I get exactly what you mean, right? Rather than sitting still, but it's about also surrounding yourself with I guess not the yes men, but people that are actually the experts in the industry. Which
That's right, exactly.
Kind of brings me to I know you mentioned about product market fit and the issue that you had in the past, right? When you were assessing the UK market, for example, right? You mentioned that in the beginning. Do you have specific insight into how you would recommend assessing that product market fit at the very beginning before you start to burn a ton of resources heading into the problem?
Again, it's testing. So right now we're running ads across Europe, across Asia, everywhere. I mean, again, you're in the ad business, right? You understand it's about testing, and it's always about testing. So you need to carve out a pretty healthy testing budget, or call it an R&D budget. Mm-hmm. With the idea that you're probably going to burn 99.9% of that budget, but the 0.1 that works is you can scale to the moon, right?
Yeah.
So you always have to have that testing mindset, no matter what business you're in, no matter if you're in software, if you're in marketing, whatever you're in, you need an R&D budget, or a testing budget. You just have to. It's just the way it works.
Yeah. And do you ever see, I mean, that sounds like that's the same setup at Maxi, right? At Maxi Media, because they
Absolutely.
have to test it across the multiple accounts that you actually work on.
That's right. So we have a bit different. We run vertical. We take a verticalized approach. So we're driving a lot of lead generation, a lot of traffic generation in certain verticals like lending or finance or education or insurance. So we're constantly testing what creators work in this vertical, what creatives work in that vertical, what's trending on TikTok. So a good percentage of our business is TikTok, and that's all about staying up to speed with what's trending and what works and what doesn't work. And so it's a constant evolving creature.
Yeah. And so I mean, with TikTok being a giant, there's a lot of people diving into that, but I don't think a lot of people still understand that it's still a testing game, right? Some people say,
That's
okay,
right.
you can just run it and run the message, and it's because of what you say that message is going to work, when it's typically not. Sometimes we find, like even with my team, we find that the message that the CEO would give us or the managing director or founder would give us is not the message that was working, right? It's a completely different message. And it's all because the client had come up with the customer had come up with that message, and what we're just doing is running creative with their particular words. And next thing you know, you've covered a pain point, a major pain point, or you've uncovered a major pain point, and you're scaling from there.
That's right.
So you've done this, had this successful exits, done it 4 times, obviously. But do you ever have the same goal of growing a business and then exiting successfully again, or you are just, are you just focused on taking that sort of expertise into places like Maxi Media?
Well, right now we're in the process of potentially, we've got a few offers on the business, so, and then I'll do it again, right? So I think there's two trains of thought here. So build a business, sell it, take chips off the table, or build a business for the long term and then grow it massively. So to date, I've done the first way. So it's basically scaling a business 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then selling it, taking chips off the table, and rolling it to the next one, to the next one. So you can do either way. I don't think either way is the wrong way. It's just whatever, I think that having financial security is a good thing. And with financial security, you can take the next big step or the next big risk without really it being risk, right? So I've got other businesses that generate cash flows that allows me to take risks, like incredible risks what other people wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah.
So I think having a pretty healthy financial backing is helpful for growing large businesses later.
Yeah. And in line with that, right, with where businesses start, was there ever, do you ever think about it in just such a black and white nature where it's just, was there a North Star metric you looked at to just stay focused the entire time, right, when growing these businesses to do the same thing? Right
now I've got targets on, sale price. So if we're going to hit X, then we will exit. If not, then we'll continue to grow until we hit X, right? Yeah. So that's kind of it's kind of a number. It's a dollar amount.
And do you think that startups should be focused on the dollar amount opposed to like the vanity metrics, right?
Everybody's different, right? What are you starting the business for? Are you starting the business for generational wealth and you hand it off to your kids, or are you starting it off to build and sell? Everybody's got a different focus, right? So if you're starting it to build, to sell, then you got to have a dollar number, or at least some kind of target. You always need a goal. You need a target. Yeah. So everybody's different, Neil. I can't tell you exactly what to do, but everybody's different, right?
I think what's important is that there's usually, especially the marketing advertising community specifically, though, when we're actually working with those clients, and I'm sure you must get this at Maxi Media, is that there's always that one North Star metric that people usually talk about. Oh, we just need the revenue numbers right now, but then not understanding, well, have we tested the product and seen if they get much responsiveness from the market first before we even start to even look at revenue? Or have we even, if we have had some feedback from the market, we're ready to scale, right? We just want leads. No traffic, no demand generation, no traffic generation, no let's improve the visibility first. They just go straight into lead generation, right? So I think that brings me to the question, which I think a lot of people would want to hear about, is what your thoughts are. Is it always about lead generation right out of the gate?
Well, you hit it. Does your product work? Are you driving leads to a product that doesn't work? So I think your product needs to work before you can waste money on marketing. I mean, invest money. That's the wrong word, is waste, but invest money in marketing. Product needs to work. I guess you have an MVP, right? So I've never, ever, created a software business or a SaaS business, but, going back to the payments world, our hardware and software needed to work. So if I put a piece of equipment in a restaurant, for example, if it wasn't able to accept a credit card, it just couldn't work. So we couldn't launch that business until our tech was up to speed.
Yeah.
So I think every business is different, but if your product doesn't work and you're going to drive, unless you're doing it for R&D, right? Unless you're testing. So for example, here's a good way, and Tim Ferriss says he does this all the time. Is let's say you're in e-commerce and you don't have a product yet, but you have an idea. Why don't you test the idea first? Spend $300, $400, $500 testing if you can drive traffic to that offer or to that product. And if you can, then you build the product. So that's a way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
So, and we actually kind of do that as well, where we're testing. So for example, take insurance. So we're testing, can we drive insurance traffic? And if we can, we're going to test it on a small budget. And then if we're able to do that, then we'll go out and find the clients, right? That are in that particular industry. So it gets back to R&D, gets back to testing, gets back to, having a pretty healthy budget for testing.
I agree. I think sometimes we think about, let's say something like PPC, like AdWords or anything like that. We see it for what it is and not what it can actually help you with specifically in that moment in time, right? And what I mean by that is we think, okay, if we push money into PPC ads, for example, it's just so that we can generate some leads to try and get them to demo the product. But we don't think that, let's use PPC because we need to understand what keywords we can potentially use to understand, are people more responsive to this sort of message or to this sort of benefit, and then they want to see the demo of the product, right? They don't think about that intermediary step. They just go straight to, well, do they want to see the product? Yes or no? And if they don't, it doesn't work.
Here's a big mistake that a lot of people make is they actually build out the product before understanding people actually want it, right? I'm sure you've seen that 100 times, right? So take an e-commerce product. So you'll actually build the manufacturing plant. You'll spend money in research and development. You'll spend money in perfecting the product, but you don't know if anybody actually wants it.
Yeah.
The same goes for software. So I think before you do that is you use a simple PPC campaign or a social media campaign, and you find out, do people actually want this product? And you can do that for not a lot of money. And you can stand up a website or stand up a funnel, a sales funnel, and figure out, do people actually want this product? And you can do that for cheap. So,
which is pretty easy when it comes to thinking about it and just executing, just to get some data, right, to understand exactly whether it works or not. Well,
exactly.
Well, that's been actually pretty good, and I think I'll have probably one ultimate question, right, for you, and it's everything in retrospect is probably how we should think about it. So, is there anything you would do differently in the very beginning, right, or wish you had known that then, that you do now to help with the entire process of building that?
I'm looking at
business.
A book called The Star Principle by Richard Koch. If there's something that I could have done differently, is I would have gotten into an industry right out of school that was on its, so the Star Principle is a company that's in an industry that's growing by, I think it's at least 30% a year, and the company itself is growing by 30% a year. So I would have found, where today is all the massive money going? The massive money is going into marketing, and it's going into blockchain technology, right? So if I were young and just starting out in business, where would I look? Today, I would probably look in blockchain. I was just at the Bitcoin 2020 event, and the amount of capital that's being poured into, Bitcoin or blockchain or Ethereum or any of the protocols is insane.
Yeah.
Right? So that's probably going to be, if and when we sell this business, the next place I stick my nose is in blockchain. Right? So get a book called The Star Principle, read that, and just take that to heart. So if you're young, just getting out of school, get into an industry that's, that where all the capital is flooding into. So back in, if I can, roll the clock back in 1992, it was the companies that were rocking at that time were just launching were companies like Microsoft and Silicon Valley. So if I could redo it again, I would have moved to Silicon Valley.
That's a different move. I think you've been seriously, it's been all over the place, right? Like that, I can't keep up. But like sports industry, you mentioned like being a sports agent and being in sort of like payments processing, now being CEO of like an advertising firm, is like a difference in what you've done, right? So, but again, I can see based on the way you thought about everything, the principles behind it, once you actually did find out exactly how to do things. Well, I don't know, Mark, if there's anything you want to add to what you were talking about. I don't know if you want to like give like a tiny nugget, a golden nugget or anything for the audience, right? So like specifically anything you feel would help like startup founders in actually ensuring that they can get traction once they've had successful product market fit, right? Any advice? Okay. Last piece of advice.
I'm going to answer that. Well, Neil, you're kind of cutting out, but I think you asked for the golden nugget before somebody can actually scale a business.
Yeah.
And to me, the golden nugget is working on yourself as a leader. There's tons of books out there. My bookcase is filled with them, but you need to educate yourself on how to become an effective leader. How to, leadership is key in growing an organization. But more than that, what about yourself? How do you act as a leader? Do you empower people? Do you not empower people? Do you talk down to them, or do you speak highly of them? Are you positive? Are you negative? There's again, I'm going to give myself a plug, but I wrote a book exactly on this, on leadership and how to be an amazing leader, called The Lucky Formula. And if you look at the 20 points in that book and you work on yourself first, then you as an effective leader can then, command respect to your team, start working with and teaching your team how to become an effective leader as well. So I think the golden nugget is work on yourself first, and then you're able to teach others how to be an amazing leader. I think that's really the golden nugget.
I think that's great, to be honest, because even myself, right, I could probably take away from that. And I think you definitely touched on it in multiple dimensions, like throughout the call. But, there we have it, everyone. Even if you're not in the exact industry Mark's been in, right, or the multiple industries he's been in, it's important to take these strategies and tactics, but test them, right? And also have the mindset that you don't need to do everything as a one-man show, right? Because that's key in itself. You're going to be sure to measure things, gather the data and run them along long enough to get data to understand whether something's working or not. And otherwise, there's been some pretty cool principles spoken about, on this call by Mark. So thanks for coming, Mark. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but it's been amazing and insightful. And this is a chat I feel people can actually take away some real actionable insights from, especially when it comes to mindset, because I think it all starts from, even for myself, when starting out, with the agency and how it's come so far, over the last year and a half. It's definitely changed, but it was predominantly down to mindset shift more than anything when it came to growing. I could only put it down to mindset shift rather than, or every man for himself and let's just go and do everything myself, right? It's so much more different, like when you're running and scaling a business at that too, getting a lot of traction out the gate. So where can people follow you and reach out to you, Mark, if they want to contact you?
So people can actually, I'm going to give your listeners a gift. So they can go to theluckyformula.com/quiz. And that's a quiz that'll calculate your lucky score. And actually it's a lot about success and leadership. So it'll calculate your lucky score, which will basically give you a number on a scale of 1 to 100. On how lucky you are, how successful you are, and if your score is low, it'll give you tips and tricks on how to increase your luck or your success ability. So again, that's theluckyformula.com/quiz. And you can find me on Instagram at Mr. Lucky Official. So that's MISTER Lucky Official.
This is that's pretty interesting. I might actually check that out myself and have a go. So, but
I can't wait to see your score, Neil. I expect you to do that.
I'll definitely do it. And I'll even ping you once I finish that. But yeah, guys, I'll link Mark's contact, his Instagram on in the description, of course. And I'll also link to the quiz if you're looking to actually take part in it. Seems pretty interesting. I know I will myself. But if you did like today's episode and want to see more, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, give us a follow, and subscribe to the channel, right? And share so that a lot of people can also hear out this message, right, from these particular talks that we're having. Comment below, obviously, if you want to see any specific content or topics on growth marketing or even business growth. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy and see you soon.